Welcome back to Spiral Revival. My name is Eli, and we are here for the solar plexus chakra, the third chakra, the third chapter of That's Just Reality. And I'm a little bit late because it definitely went into the solar plexus energies for the eclipse. And it's funny because in the last episode, I was like, I don't know when it's going to go into solar. Like, we're just going to have to see. And afterwards, I was like, obviously, it's going to happen when the solar eclipse happens. And it definitely did. I was in Texas for the Texas Eclipse Festival, which was intense and incredibly beautiful and strange, dualistic, full of duality. Yeah, the festival, the experience itself was, for myself, beautiful. I feel that we as a collective have gotten to a point, and especially in such an amplified container, it was very clear that we've gotten to a point where our magic, our wizardry, our telepathy, our energy work is so visceral and so clear that we don't even have to like insinuate or like see if the other person is understanding. Like, we all know, we are consciously aware and consciously working and acting upon our gifts. And it was such an honor and blessing and beautiful experience to work with that in a collective, magical, free space. Yeah, just experience like levels of telepathy and magic that I haven't tasted on these realms before, but are very familiar to us from other realms and memories and lifetimes. And so we're very clearly stepping into our power as a collective, as wizards and fairies and magicians, magi, and that's very exciting. What was interesting about this event is, if you don't know about it or didn't hear, it got canceled just a few hours before the eclipse, when there was a whole nother day, night, and morning set to be. And what it felt like was like the festival, like we were in a sacred circle, and in sacred circles during ceremony and in Indigenous cultures, or just in, as humans, when we create a sacred circle, we're not supposed to break that circle. It's very important. And it felt like they broke the circle. However, since the actual event production, like the actual container, was out of integrity, and a lot of the magic filling it was in integrity, it was almost like a release, a freedom, an allowing to expand, because we hadn't reached closure, and the energy was so amplified and so strong, especially after that eclipse, that what it allowed was, when they broke the circle, broke the container, the magic just spilled out into the world, into the real world, into Austin, Texas, into New Mexico, into Arizona, into California, and beyond, where I would know. Everywhere that everyone went to continue the party, continue the magic, continue the flow of what was going on. It also felt like a beautiful example and potentially foreshadowing of what is possible and how to deal with energies of authority when they try to control us. It felt like when they sent out those emails saying it's canceled, everyone has to leave right now, people were not ready to leave and hadn't prepared for that. And it was probably more dangerous to make everyone leave in that moment than it would have been to have everyone leaving in rain. That didn't come until the next day. But it was an example, foreshadowing of like a majority of people that received that message and were being told to leave, like reflected into that reality and responded into that reality and went into fear, went into paranoia, went into obedience and submissiveness to that authority that was out of integrity and packed up and left, and that was the end of their experience. And another frequency that was happening was that was just happening. Like, we have generated our own container, and we're going to stay in this container because this container is unaffected, whether we stayed, whether we left. And being in that sovereignty and in that lineage, that path of miracles, walking that path of miracles. And what I experienced, because I did stay in that frequency, was that we connect, like we all connected with each other that were in that frequency. And so many synchronicities and connections and beautiful weaving happened from staying in that frequency. And it felt like a potent message of, if that were when that is to happen in on a larger scale in our civilization of like an authoritarian government move of like everyone needs to do this right now, like everyone go inside, everyone leave, everyone this, just remembering that we are protected beyond the protection that they can grant us, trusting that, being smart, being aware, being vigilant, and staying in your lineage of miracles, staying in your frequency and in your protection will bring you beyond what you could ever imagine, and understanding that that does not control you. All of that. So many lessons. Along with the solar plexus, definitely stepping into our power, into our awareness, our visceral awareness of ourselves in our individuality and in our collective awareness. This solar eclipse was in Aries, and the sun is still in Aries. It entered Aries for the solar eclipse, and what's interesting is that the Aries is the ram, and the solar plexus frequency, the sound for the solar plexus is rum, 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 rum. And ram, this fire. The Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, so it's like this, the first breath of life when we step into this realm. The spark of life. This is like what the Aries is. It's also kind of like connected to the Fool card. Of just like taking these steps, these leaps, these steps forward. And that's really potent for right now because we're entering spring, summer, this, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, this heat, this aliveness, this externality, this beingness, and we're entering this new chapter as this new year, which is an 8 year in the wooden dragon. 8, as we'll get into in the later chapters of my book, there's the 7, there's the magical number 7 of this completion through the chakric system and reflected through so many different modalities. But then the 8 is that next level, which is the turning of the double helix. It's the twisting vortex that brings you into that next opening. So there's like opening, expansion through the 7, and then to that point again, twist and opening, and twist and opening, twist and opening. And the 8 is that twist point, and the shape of the 8 is that twist point as well. And that twist is the vortex, it's the channel, it's the alchemy, it's the transformation, transmutation. It's like you're being portaled through a black hole into this new reality. So we're in that 8 year, entering into it with this solar eclipse in the Aries, in Ram, and simultaneously entering the solar plexus chakra in this hero's journey through the solstices and equinox points cycle that I went over in the very first episode of this series, which is the one just before this. So I trust that you feel it. It is not hiding. It is not covert. It is not secretive. It's very present, very out there, very strong. Whether you're someone who pays attention to those energies or not, it is being felt with strange dreams, with lack of sleep, with fatigue, with sickness. We're like getting these upgrades, whatever it is that our body needs. It's purging. There's a lot of purging, whether it's crying, getting sick, getting an infection, throwing up, releasing a lot of relationships, just feeling that sense of closure in relationships that aren't going to be serving us in this alchemical point where we're being jetted off to where we are positions for this important time. It's just clear and evident, you know, who we're meant to be around and what we're meant to be focusing on. It's exciting. And it's beautiful, and I'm just so honored to like be here in the world, feeling a lot of interesting messages came through. One was like to not be afraid of the magnetism and the attraction that you generate when you're in your highest self, that we're not afraid of when we're feeling insecure or anxious, we're not afraid of our weakness or that we may fail. We're actually afraid of how powerful, attractive, and magnetic we are when we're in our highest and full expression, because we don't know, or we feel unsure, or we're nervous about the reaction. We don't know if we have the capacity to hold the reaction that our magnetism draws to us. For me, as a young woman in the world, like if I'm being my full self, I'm naturally sexy and attractive, magnetic. And when I'm around beautiful people that I trust and feel safe, that's awesome. But when I'm out in a gas station and some dude, you know, wants to talk to me, it's like I feel nervous. I don't want to deal with that. So I start shutting myself down so that we don't attract that energy. And whatever the case may be, whether it's we're afraid somebody might challenge us and we don't know how we would react to that, you know, that's what we're actually most of the time scared of when we're feeling anxious or self-conscious. And so that came through, and it was like, there's no more time for that. Be in your magnetism, be in your attraction, because you're pulling in beautiful opportunities. And it's, you know, the throat chakra, discernment, expression of boundaries is also extremely important. And to have that groundedness, and that, you know, as humans, we're a bridge between heaven and earth. So just being in the rootedness and in the groundedness, presence, and keeping that channel open above and through your crown, and being a clear channel for beauty, strength, and like really being that guiding light that leads by example, and knowing how to protect that innocence and purity for yourself and for others, in yourself, for yourself and for others, if that makes sense, because protecting your own purity and light is supporting the collective. Another one that was very clear in terms of like this authoritarian conflict that came through, and with the book that I was reading, which is The Fifth Sacred Thing, super amazing book, and I think really potent for these times. It's by Starhawk, and it's an incredible novel about revolution, and revolution based in the earth and in love and in art and in leading by example in this beauty way. And it's so potent for these times. I assign it to you for your curriculum. Go on Thrift Books. That's the best place. And so, yeah, one of the clear messages that came through right now is that we are in training and really opening our hearts up to the possibility of transmuting the enemy, alchemizing conflict into care, and seeing even the most disgusting, inhumane, and cruel enemy as a wounded being, and as a being who has been trained as a victim in a way in themselves. They've been trained, they've been brainwashed, they've been assaulted with propaganda and dogma, and not given a fair chance at their humanity. And from this place, in the book, there was a quote that they used when they were being invaded by a very cruel oppressor, and their people were being killed, and they remained in their position of non-violence, yet being non-cooperative, and inviting the enemy in, alchemizing the enemy, because if the enemy comes in and you treat them, and you don't treat them like an enemy, there's a potential there to transmute them from enemy into community member. So they would say to them, there is a table for you, there's a seat for you at our table if you wish to join us. And just staying adamant on that. And they didn't believe them at first, and then just seeing, like, that's just, it's the power of being in your open heart and in leading by example and in living this beautiful life. It shows others that it's possible and that we can create our own reality. And that's truly what we want in the depths of our humanness. So also what it does is it's a revolutionary way of transformation. It's a revolutionary way of revolution. For as humans, we have a long history of war and of violence, and we've repeated these patterns and stories so many times. And what this has the power to do is not only alchemize our enemy, but alchemize the historical war story and the relationship of us versus them, the relationship of the oppressor and the oppressed, alchemizing it entirely into something beyond, into a reality that's beyond that relationship, and into a reality that's beyond that at all. And yeah, it felt very clear to hold that as an ideal in these coming times. I have some readings for us from this third chapter in my book, That's Just Reality, that is based in the solar plexus chakra. This chapter is called The Word is Not the Thing and is focused on language. Here's the chapter page. Yellow 3 spheres. I focused for this chapter on language because language has become the determining influence in the reality that we operate in, and therefore who we are, because who we are creates the world, and our inner world is shaped and formed by the matrix of language and culture. So like we mentioned in the last chapters, there's the 3 filters of reality. First, there's time, space. Then there's the sensory receptors we have. And then once information has been received through both of those filters into our mind, it is then filtered through our language and culture. So now we're diving into, which is, who we've built ourselves to be. And so now we're diving into the analysis of language and the influence that it has and the power it holds and how to deconstruct and construct it consciously so that we can start making that filter more malleable and within our power. And really the funny thing is, once we've been able to do that, the other 2 filters that seem untouchable actually start to become more malleable themselves. Our relationship to time, space, and our limitation of our sensory receptors of our body. So I'll just get into these readings and start unfurling the petals of this chapter. It starts with an excerpt from Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception, page 23. Our mind protects us from being overwhelmed and confused by this mass of largely useless and irrelevant knowledge by shutting out most of what we should otherwise perceive or remember at any moment, and leaving only that very small and special selection which is likely to be practically useful. According to such a theory, each one of us is potentially mind at large, but insofar as we are animals, our business is at all costs to survive. To make biological survival possible, mind at large has to be funneled through the reducing valve of the brain and nervous system, the filter. What comes out at the other end is a measly trickle of the kind of consciousness which will help us to stay alive on the surface of this particular planet. To formulate and express the contents of this reduced awareness, man has invented and endlessly elaborated those symbol systems and implicit philosophies which we call languages. Every individual is at once the beneficiary and the victim of the linguistic tradition into which he has been born. The beneficiary inasmuch as language gives access to the accumulated records of other people's experience. The victim insofar as it confirms him in the belief that reduced awareness is the only awareness, and as it bedevils his sense of reality, so that he is all too apt to take his concepts for data, his words for actual things. That which, in the language of religion, is called this world, is the universe of reduced awareness, expressed and, as it were, petrified by language. So well put, and just in one page able to summarize what I then expressed in this whole chapter. I just want to touch a little bit more on the energies of the solar plexus so that you can tie it in as I read, because like I mentioned, these chapters weren't intended to be connected to the chakras, but I found that they quite clearly were, maybe just not as obviously on the surface level. We might think, oh, language, shouldn't that go with the throat chakra? But like I was mentioning, our language really determines our sense of self and like who we are and how we express ourselves. And the solar plexus is that is the ego. It's the sense of self. It's the, if we see it as like this sun at our navel, combined with this timing of the Aries solar eclipse, it's like the Aries also is like out to determine a sense of self, and it's this ambition. The solar plexus is your personal power. It is the highest of the lower chakras, root, sacral, solar, and then we get into heart, throat, third eye, crown. Rum, rum, rum. This is our center of our earthly sense of self, our beingness, the way that we show up in the world, the way that we create. The sacral is our creative force, and it connects to the throat chakra. The sacral and the throat chakra connect. And both of them are very much creative. The solar is like the way in which we show up to create. Who is creating. And out of alignment, it can be deeply insecure, it can be egoic and narcissistic and controlling, and in alignment, it is a wonderful steward. It confidence, security, and sense of self. Yeah, I feel like you get it. So here we go. I'm going to read parts of this third chapter. The word is not a thing, which that phrase comes from Krishnamurti's book on God. Starting with a quote from Epictetus. It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Reality goes far beyond magic or science, religion or reason. The entirety of all being, non-being, and becoming is reality, yet somehow natural order is dismissed as ordinary, and we slip into the comfort of naive realism, left to hopelessly search in movies and books for a taste of something mystical because we have forgotten the magic in the mundane. To become receptive to it, there must first be awareness of how it's filtered out all the time, creating this tunnel vision existence. The illusion of reality we feed into is constructed and reinforced by culture and linguistics. Sensory data is collected from space-time and immediately boxed into categories by the mechanism of language. Watch your thoughts and notice the constant conversation of the mind, instantaneously wording out and explaining reality to itself. Observe conversations and take note of all which is an attempt to confirm one's perception by establishing a common ground of legitimacy with others. Of course, language is magical itself. Words package concepts we can share by emitting specific vibrations we trust the receiver can decode. When we intake words, whether written or heard, they are absorbed and processed at all levels of consciousness. Like a mental program, language forms our disposition, our personal lens on the world. Prayer, mantra, affirmations, curses, and spells, words have the incredible ability to send messages throughout space and time, but they can't express the transcendental. Although they move through it, they are still within space-time, and in this transition from feeling to word, it's easy to forget that the word is not the thing. A quote from Terence McKenna. It seems quite reasonable for me to say that what we call reality is a lower dimensional slice of a higher dimensional face space which we cut with the knife of language. I love him. Young children have eternal love and peace fresh in their hearts, eager to learn about the world. They are given labels until everything, including themselves, fits into its proper role. My mom used to explain it as a seed. She would say that when we label somebody, a seed is planted in them, and as time goes, it grows in the garden of their mind. What you accept and overall what you feed forms the frame of mind with which you receive reality. Not only do we become what we've been labeled, but the actual process of labeling. Most people are never taught how to turn off the constant judgment and live the majority of their lives putting a cap on their experience. Language is discriminatory by nature. For example, by calling a tree, it's treated as a solitary object. Really, it's a manifestation of the entire organism of our earth. The tree is one with the process of photosynthesis, root systems, its water source, the organisms it supports. From molecular to cosmic, there's an infinite interconnectivity that's excluded by the mechanism of modern language. And it's the same with each one of us. Primarily, this is because we are within self-preserving bodies that must register reality at a compartmentalized level in order to survive within it as physical beings. Our existence is dictated by this inner voice and we don't even notice. Instead, we find ourselves in a disenchanted world formatted by procedure when everything we experience appears to be contained within a definition. The overwhelming divinity of the present moment is overlooked. A quote from Plato's Republic. Each of them, dualities, in itself is one thing, but by the intermixture and action and bodies and with one another, through which they are everywhere made visible, each appears to be many things. Although the ability to distinguish our environment is necessary, we can try to use language as a tool which serves us instead of a constant veil over our eyes. In the evolution of humanity, there came a time in northern Africa when humanoids developed bipedalism. For one reason or another, they lifted their hands off the ground and started to commute by foot. Simple tools began to develop. 1 or 2 hits to a rock to make a sharp enough spear. And as they developed more advanced tools using their hands, their brains developed recursion. Recursion is the ability to process and create repetition. Now they could hit the rock various times in order to shape it into a precise spearhead. But recursion is also necessary for the development of language. For language is like a Russian doll, where various statements are encased within each other and strung along to express complete ideas. So, taking our hands off the ground brought about language. And since the appearance of linguistics, human evolution has expanded and complicated itself exponentially into the globalized and compartmentalized world of today. If in the same way that we lifted our hands, we could lift our unconscious dependency on the linguistically driven rational mind, imagine the consciousness expanding evolution awaiting us. This is something that I learned when I was in my anthropology class studying philosophy in Spain, and it blew my mind. Like, we, as our ancient history, memory of human, shadow of man, selves, ape-like beings, we lifted our hands up off the ground, whether to reach higher fruit in the tree or to be able to see a further horizon line. And this freed up our hands as tools instead of just feet. And with these tools, we started being able to create other tools, the externalization of our rational mind into the world. And by using our hands to create other tools, this process of recursion developed in our brain, and we unlocked this recursion ability, which for us at the time was useful so that we could see one rock and know that we wanted to eventually have one precise spearhead from that rock. It seems so mundane now because we're so used to it, but like that's a concept that, like, if you're a baby or a dog, wouldn't be able to understand, is like, we're going to hit this one rock multiple times in many different places to create one shape out of the rock. And that process unlocked recursion in our brain. Coincidentally, recursion is also unlocking recursion in the brain unlocks the mechanism of language development in the brain. Because recursion is what's needed to be able to handle those concepts of language, which encase each other and form larger ideas with various little words and sentences. And basically lifting our hands up off of the ground led to language, which led to this whole world. Because if you think about it, we would not be able to this world would not exist. The world we have created as humans would not exist without the ability to communicate through language and express ideas and bring forth the memories and the ideas of our past and philosophize about our future and our reality. And so right now I've had many beautiful conversations with people about, what is it that maybe we're dependent on now that we could lift our consciousness from, to unlock these new capabilities, like capabilities we couldn't even imagine because these ancient beings could never fathom the world we live in now. And there is a world like that awaiting us in our future that we could never even think of in our current state of being. So for me, I found, what we've become dependent on now is language. Language is that third filter that we've become dependent on, but that we can control. And if we lift our dependency on language, if we lift the dependency of our state of being, of our beingness, of our sense of self and our relation to the world, its dependency off of language, like, what consciousness expanding revolution awaits us? We continue. The evolution of humanity is reflected in the life of every individual. We are capable of integrating expansive beliefs to shift our reality, personal evolution, and in our own transformation, we inspire others to do the same and slowly spread the evolution to those ready for the journey. Quote from Plato's Republic: "I cannot conceive that any science makes the soul look upwards unless it has to do with the real and invisible. It makes no differing whether a person stares stupidly at the sky or looks with half-shut eyes upon the ground. So long as he is trying to study any sensible object, I deny that he can ever be said to have learned anything." This one's interesting because he says that I cannot conceive that any science makes the soul look upwards unless it has to do with the real and invisible. So he's saying that what is real, reality in itself, is invisible, is not what is here in matter, is not reality in itself. And it doesn't matter whether you look up at the sky or down at the earth, as long as you're trying to study any sensory object, this material world, you're not actually studying reality in itself. Language is normally a subconscious constant. If we aren't speaking, we're caught in internal dialogue, perpetually keeping us from stillness, and when we do speak, it's often thoughtless and reactionary. Without acknowledging the power of the words we use, they become diluted. Quote from Tao Te Ching, "He who knows speaks not. He who speaks knows not. He who is sincere does not embellish, and he who embellishes is not sincere. He who is good disputes not, and he who knows does not game. He who games knows not." Verbally, the overuse of adjectives and adverbs subconsciously implies an untrustworthy speaker. For example, to casually say "it was extremely beautiful" would give "it was beautiful" the meaning of "it was just beautiful." The power of the word is minimized and grows dependent on adjectives to express just how much you really mean what you say. To integrate language as a conscious tool of communication, we must say what we mean. We can embrace the communicative abilities of language while preventing it from controlling us or manipulating others, with awareness of its power. So, yeah. Here we are in a place where we have the power to analyze and bring conscious awareness into our relationship with language, with culture, our use of it, and the way that it is influencing us when others use it. And in doing so, reshaping our solar plexus, our center, our sense of self and being in the world, the way that we move in the world is alchemized from unconscious dependency, dependency on the matrix that we find ourselves in, that we've been born into. And in this way, I find it extremely useful to learn, this is why it's so important to go around the world and experience other cultures, integrate them into your being, like understand the traditions, the global of our peers around the world and our ancestors around the world. For we are all human. We are all indigenous to this land. Indigenous is of this earth. And we are all of this earth. And it is useful, it is valuable for us to traverse this earth and learn and integrate into our daily lives, into our beingness, the many different matrices that have been brought forth, and understand the perspectives that have been on this earth, and integrate them, weave them into, instead of having like a more two-dimensional matrix of just maybe like English and American culture, or even just being from Portugal and only knowing Portuguese and what Portugal is like. When we expand the languages that we know how to speak and get to the point where we can dream and think in them, the cultures that we understand, traditions and religions that we understand, philosophies that we can understand, not that we have to believe them all for ourselves personally, but get to a place where we can understand them and see how they made sense for humanity. We are then expanding the dimensionality of our inner matrix of that language culture filter. It becomes expanded, it becomes omnidimensional, it becomes like, it adds facets to our crystal in our temple, in our mind temple. and diversifies our thoughts, diversifies our understanding of nuance in this world, allows much more compassion, grace, humility, and I feel like that's one of the major curriculums of the eternal student on this earth, is to go and learn and experience as many cultures, languages, and people as we can from a very like receptive place. This brings me, when I was meditating on what I wanted to talk about in this episode, Indigenous wisdom kept coming up, and I was trying to understand how it fits in. And then when I opened the book to study the chapter, this solar plexus chakra chapter is where my mother's Amazonian Summers essay is. So I was like, okay, of course, yeah, this is what I was picking up on. And I want to tie it into that lesson that is coming forth for us as the collective right now of alchemizing the enemy and transmuting conflict into care. And the most beautiful example that I can share with you is Indigenous wisdom and love. It is the most beautiful love that I've ever experienced on this earth, and a love I didn't know could exist on this earth, because we've always seen examples of war being fought with violence, of the oppressors fighting back with reciprocated hatred for the oppressor. And what I have had the honor of witnessing and coming to, I don't want to say understand because there's so much more to understand, but coming to like accept and see is the inherent care that, and like desire to alchemize the enemy that Indigenous cultures hold, that many do hold, specifically those who have more shamanic traditions. Native people, we're all native people. Like I was mentioning, we're all Indigenous people to this earth. However, people who are in their Indigenous culture, in the native culture and traditions actively, and have preserved them and living in them, have what they're working with is the wisdom and the love of the earth, being in relationship with the earth and having a collective visceral knowledge and knowing of the earth's love. And the earth's love is unconditional. No matter how much we pollute her oceans, she continues to purify our waste to the best of her capabilities. She never punishes us. She, however many trees we cut, she continues to grow them. And however much we pollute our earth, the trees continue to purify that air for us. There's no conditional relationship there. It's unconditional, it's true, it's motherly. And so this is, Indigenous cultures are in deep relationship with this wisdom, with this love that the earth shares. I have had the honor and the privilege and the blessing of sitting in ceremony and working with the Yawanawa lineage for ayahuasca, and I can't even begin to try to put into words what that has been like. It's some of the most beautiful experiences of my life. There was a time at Lightning in a Bottle 2022 where the Yawanawa were the invited tribe to come and speak and hold circle at the sacred fire. And at one of their talks, because right now is a very pivotal point as well in Indigenous cultures where like their songs have never been allowed to be recorded, and also you weren't supposed to like ever play other kinds of music when their music is being played and during ceremony. And now in this globalization, archaic revival time of duality, they've been opening up, you know, because you can't control people as you share your medicine and your music to larger and larger audiences, who's recording, who's not, like how that container is being held. So they're very much putting themselves in a very vulnerable position for the sake of sharing their culture. And at this talk, they shared an ancient prophecy from their tribe, which was, I will say it very briefly so as not to like butcher it, but before the white man came to the Amazon, a grandson served his grandfather Hape, and his grandfather shared his prophecy with him that these people who live like ants, which was his way of describing the Western world, are going to come. And even though they may be violent, like, don't fight back because they can destroy us very easily. And ultimately there will be, you know, it ended with a very similar like eagle condor prophecy of like union. And eventually they did come, and there was rape and murder for rubber and oil, and there was, you know, the tribes were decimated. And ultimately with the Yawanawa tribe, they were able to gain independence through making their own personal deal with a cosmetics company for resources that they have in their territories. And that allowed them to gain independence. And what we see is that, and what I've experienced in sitting in ceremony with them, is they, once they've gotten this freedom and stability, what they've done is they've gone and began serving medicine on tours in Europe and in North America, in the Western regions, to heal these people, the lineage, the line, the race of people that were so sick that they could have done something so horrible to their people. It wasn't to go destroy. It wasn't to go, you know, build repositories of guns and go kill them back. It was literally to take their medicine that they know can heal the darkest of wounds and bring it to the lands of the people who were so sick that they could have done such cruel acts, because there's a deep understanding that that's the only thing we can do is heal each other. That's the only thing that could possibly end in the beauty that we envision for ourselves, is a world where we're all healed. So they have gone to just do that healing work and truly invite in the oppressor. Like, there is a seat for you at our table if you wish to join us, and initiating Westerners in this tradition of medicine and bringing them in and holding space for their dietas so that they can heal not only themselves but their ancestry and their forecasters and all their children. That is the example. Indigenous wisdom is our guiding light now, as we are all coming into our like rainbow warriorhood of strength in the beauty way. Some of the most potent medicine we can embark on is sitting with Indigenous wisdom and learning from many different traditions. And when I've spent time with Northern Native American traditions, I've seen similar acts of grace. That's what it is, really, is grace, where maybe, you know, somebody who doesn't know how to act in the space, doesn't know how, like, the tradition, it's not anger that they're faced with. How dare you bring your phone into the sweat lodge? It's a beautiful, long story of why we should never bring our phone into the sweat lodge. You know, it's like, and after so much pain, why should they have so much grace for the oppressor? And it's the alchemization of the enemy and transmutation of conflict to care, because that's the world we want to live in. So why would we continue creating a violent, angry world? And that's what I see in more like politically correct LA like bubble, is people just virtue signaling and being more than happy to just start policing each other, even though it's ACAB. Just, oh, let's just start policing each other. And I understand where it comes from, and I don't need to get into all that right now, but we have a much higher potential in terms of how we can elicit change and connect with our peers and have meaningful conversations about nuance, about diversity of thought, about understanding why we might want to do something a certain way, why it's important. Because that's what all we have is each other in our community. So it's really important to give the mic to Indigenous wisdom, Indigenous elders, Indigenous cultures, support them in their efforts of remembering their traditional languages and providing this education for their youth. There is a nuance to it in this archaic revival time of Indigenous wisdom becoming trendy, and it's this double-edged sword because it's like there's now, spiritual tourism and like neo-colonialism guised under spirituality, and people seeking medicine and healing, and really they're just taking. But then also it's like, this is much better. It's much better for, Indigenous wisdom to be desired than for it to be destroyed. But it can still be damaged through that consumption of it without understanding reciprocity. Because what I see is that this open-heartedness and welcoming in, there's a seat for you at our table if you wish to join us. For some people, it's very clear how fucking potent that is in the face of everything that has happened to Indigenous cultures. And it is like, wow, like I deeply respect and have reverence for that. And I'm going to be very aware of how I show up in this space and, observe how you move in this space and follow your lead. For other people, it's what they've been dying to hear, and they feel absolved. And they just enter the space without tuning into what the rules of the space are, what the guidance is, without looking to this Indigenous wisdom as guidance. Just being so glad that they are welcomed in the space, and it feeds their ego to be welcomed into an Indigenous space, and they don't stop to feel how potent it is that they've been welcomed into that space. And so we see this in, specifically, like, let's say in festivals where there is the sacred fire. That's so amazing that's there. That's so amazing that these Indigenous elders are being invited to like hold the hearth of this space, and that there is this focus. However, never before have Indigenous people been holding ceremony in a space where people are like wearing insane outfits and on MDMA and have no sleep and are like not conscious of the container and might just stumble into the container. Like, that's never been the case. This is part of the messiness of the archaic revival that we're in right now. And so then that comes with, like, these Indigenous people are being like paid and invited into these spaces to hold this space. And so then they're there to say welcome. And that can have an interesting effect too, because maybe something isn't welcome. How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to keep this discernment? So yeah, continuing to just give the Indigenous people the mic and let them lead this revolution of transmuting conflict to care, and being like humble students and like supporters of this wisdom, because it really is like the guidance into this new earth that we are envisioning for us all, is this connection to the earth, this ancient grounded knowledge that isn't new age, that is ancient. Yeah, so that's what was wanting to come through on that. And I guess to close this time, because we're already at an hour, I would love to read this essay from my mother on her memories of growing up in the Amazon. and her call to action for us all. It is called Amazonian Summers, or Morn, by my mother, Asira Malanda, who is from Venezuela and grew up there. This essay is written by my mother. I had heard of her times in the Amazon from brief mentions throughout my life. While I was living in Valladolid, Spain, and writing this book between philosophy lectures in my little dorm room, I asked her to please write me an essay about her experience. Upon receiving this writing, I first learned the details of her experience, and when I read her description of the Amazon, I began to cry from a deep place. Not just the first time, but every time I read the passage, I would cry, I would mourn. It was this writing and the feeling it left me that pulled me out of university and sent me on a 2-month backpacking trip from Panama, my birthplace, to Costa Rica. Through my birth city, the land of my conception, new friends, and old family. The images in this piece are from that journey. Again, if you do have your own copy, it's fun to follow along probably. And if you don't, I have a few available left. They're dwindling and I'm happy and sad. Memory is a very important yet mysterious aspect of the human brain. We feel we forget, or that we unconsciously erase. Sometimes we remember a day from 30 years ago by heart, but can't say what we had for lunch yesterday. It's interesting that we constantly have that part of our brain failing. Throughout history, it would have been a savior for humanity to remember clearly. Last month, I was reading an amazing book by Andrea Wolf, The Invention of Nature. I chose this book from the shelf because it's about the life of Alexander von Humboldt, who in the 1800s was exploring the Amazon by foot, many other places in South and Central America. His name was that of streets, schools, mountains, and plazas while I was growing up in my country, Venezuela. I would even hear him at my house because my grandmother was a geographer and naturalist who would often quote him throughout the day. Some passages from The Invention of Nature caused very vivid memories to resurface of my times in the Amazon as a young girl. The beautiful Amazon, that although has been heavily violated by us the last 200 years, is still an absolutely stunning and unbelievable scene of what Earth looks like untouched. I'm certainly not inviting you to come, as I actually wish no one was allowed there. But imagine the blue sky over a dense ocean-sized jungle. Imagine huge plateaus, tepuis, spread through the land, and if you manage to reach the top, have flora and fauna of their very own. Imagine rivers of different colors and pink dolphins playing in their fresh water. Imagine naked kids that aren't poor. Imagine so much water falling from so high that even a mile away its strong breeze blows your hair. Imagine trees so full of birds that even the trunks are covered in colors. Imagine nights that you won't rest because you can actually go to any star you wish. Imagine insects from a fantasy land. Imagine walking barefoot through the jungle and there's no better way. If I knew then that it was set for destruction, I would have chosen to give my little living term to be with it. The first time I went to Canaima at age 5 in 1980, I stayed at Campamento Ucaimo. I was there with a filming crew, and by the second day, while the adults were busy with projects and cameras now ready to film, the local kids had made me theirs already. I remember the director frustrated that I would not smile or focus on my now very surreal job of acting. I just wanted to leave in the curiara, a South American dugout canoe, with my friends again. I wanted my shoes and shirt off. I wanted to play with my friends without words to share, running and swimming in my new world. Finally, I smiled for the filming project when a coral snake chased the director's shoes and made him run and climb anything he could find. The rest of the days I did smile for the cameras after everyone would remind me of the snake chase and promise to let me go with my friends for the rest of the day. 5 years old. At that age, a kid in the jungle is free, living in the real world, learning by adventuring every day while the moms watch as they come and go. We knew to come back before sunset, and we had handmade clay whistles hanging from our necks in case we needed help. I remember my fat, chunky kid fingers grasping the rail of the wooden curiara and the smell of so much water in the air. I believe I did not forget these old memories because it felt so good and real to be alive that way. At the end of the trip, on the small plane to Puerto Ordaz, I cried the most silent tears I ever have. All this just to return to where we forget and believe something else is life. All that I had enjoyed before returning to the Amazon years later never made me feel like those 10 days in Canaima. I came back to the Amazon later on as a teenager, and I recognized I was not the same anymore. Now I felt fears. I would doubt. I was the admirer, not a part of it. And that's what we all become. Every one of those 3 visits needed to be as long as they were to allow me to settle back into the natural state. It occurs by the force of time and not choice. After a few stressful days and nights, getting used to not being in a hotel and slowly planting tents deeper into the Amazon, I finally merged into it. Each day was full of presence and hard work. One morning, I went alone from our campground to Pozo Esmeralda in Pauhi. I had gone down the trail to the natural pool a few times with my friends, but that day I was fine to go alone. My clothes came off to wash them along with some cooking utensils, and as I swam, I opened my mouth to catch water from the waterfall. I looked back to the pool to find that with me are now 2 Pemon mothers, cleaning stuff too. There's no talking. When the kids swam to play with the waterfall, I was game too, so I was found by my worried friends playing topless with 2 Indigenous mothers and their children. Many other memories could burst now just to make me realize that our world is pretty much like the movie Avatar by James Cameron, made so brilliantly just to sadly be categorized as science fiction. Most of us forget that life was meant to be that real. We're just not blue. I remembered that shoes for me were like the worst thing to carry over there. Friends would make fun of me, but I truly felt so much more without wearing my Timberland hiking boots. I swear you will have a much better grip everywhere if you just let your feet do their job. The connection between the soil gives the brain an entire source of information that we just aren't used to anymore. It makes you silent, assertive, fast, sensible, and connected. Shoes made us forget a lot too, and I only respect them to protect you from the heat or cold. Isn't it interesting that how in cities we deduce a lot about people from their shoes? It's serious social brain damage. The last time I flew above the Amazon, we were over pure, deep green jungle for an hour, and I checked my reflection in the window glass while the others were talking about what would be of us if our helicopter fell right there. I was a beautiful, strong girl, with my hair down, jeans washed in the river without soap, yet perfectly clean, because the oxygen passes through them as they sun-dry. No shoes, a tank top made by a Yanomami woman, and some decorated braids. I was transformed into the best version of myself, yet the thought of falling didn't scare me. I was looking down wondering about falling when I spotted a thin line of smoke coming up. We were all impressed with it, a campfire coming up from the very middle of the most dense section of the jungle. My heart's secret desire was to stay, to be brave and leave the little world of all I knew to become more of what I was leaving behind. Sure enough, man's ego is to blame. We needed no money, we needed no shoes, we didn't even need the trading of food. This planet had it all for us like heaven. No one even had to praise anything except maybe the magical renewable abundance of our planet that surely seems to be God. Unknown, intelligent, creative energy. All of it made with so much love for us. I will never, ever understand what we're doing to life, why we made such a mess, how minds are so washed that everyone loves an object more than their own hair, their teeth, their skin. We're given perfect bodies, equipped to experience a joyful and daring life in harmony with brothers, sisters, animals, and space. Is it fear of the crocodile that sleeps and surprises? Is it envy of youthful beauty that makes you kill and decorate yourself with animal skins? Is it believing that you're so right that made you drop your Bible over there? What is it? Is it us trying to make it better? Better than everything I just described? Does it make you feel good Samaritan to donate tons of clothes and books and shoes, modern world essential trash, because those natives are poor, right? Who is poor? Poverty did not ever exist in the world. We created poverty to better define richness, condemning natural living so to make money from all we do. For it we kill and we also die, like bugs into fire. As I mourned for those memories, I recalled a book by Lynn Twist, The Soul of Money, where she quotes John Perkins, who heads an organization called the Dream Change Coalition, which works to change the dream of the modern world. The indigenous shamans and elders, with whom John has studied for years, teach that the world is as you dream it. The dream we have had in the modern world, they say, is a dream of more. More factories, more companies, more freeways, more houses, more money, more buildings, more cars, more everything. These wise elders and shamans point out that dream is now becoming a nightmare, rippling across our great earth and wreaking havoc. The Earth's population is now so massive that it can't and would not like to experience life without all the unnecessary things that we've forgotten. We have been far too many generations to undo our made-up better dream. No wonder Earth washes us off sometimes. Expect it and surrender because we have been the most offensive creature to our source. I've experienced the social impact of this when I lived in a small beach town in Panama. The problem was that the Panama Canal hired men, leaving new generations kind of lost without a male figure at home. We thought of teaching kids to swim, so later on the elder fishermen could take them on small field trips and teach them how to do their fishing, diving, and scavenging. Our way was ideal to safely bring up a younger generation with the guide of their own culture instead of replacing it with another. Studying ecotourism back then confirmed my notion that we had to be ecological when developing the tourism industry. Not only environmentally, but with the social impact as well. We must stop believing that we are doing good by sending stuff, making schools, building churches, hotels, bringing new ideas to remote places all over the world. I have also been back and forth to Costa Rica the last 10 years, and just 3 years ago I was invited to a mass ceremony at a Christian church. I went to see the children down by the palapa, where 2 ladies were entertaining them. One of the ladies had a story to tell. Something about how the dirty kids by the road were having a hard time because they didn't love Jesus like we did. Brilliant. Here's the thing. That lady still thinks that she was right. Tell me something. When you travel to Fiji, when you go to Africa or to India feeling exotic and worried about mosquitoes and sun, do you see kids barefoot, maybe naked, dirty with earth stuff, and feel pity for them? You're surely too special to touch the dirt with your feet. Maybe they need Jesus, or flip-flops, or medicine. Okay, I understand you're so clean and your habits are so good, you shouldn't die. You're too good. But wouldn't it be more exciting to die fighting with a leopard under the full moon rather than of cancer in a cold hospital that's only trying to get you back so you can continue to pay your mortgage? I wonder if the problem lies in strong DNA wired to continued colonization. Just self-satisfaction, maybe God, golden glory, who knows? We're wasting the opportunity to use time and money to study the possibility that the best we can do for our world is to work on ourselves. That dream of more is making me forget what I know, where I come from, and my advocacy. I hope that my Amazonian summer morning has been a mirror for all of us reading. We are trapped in this modern dream of more, but from it we can also help somehow. I would suggest we start by being more mindful when we travel to not contaminate the people you meet with stuff and thoughts, or the land with trash. Respect. Even the way you dress is impactful. Your sunglasses are awful. Be okay with staying simple and enjoy open-mindedness. Love and light with pride. Asi, my mother. Blessings to your day. May you hold this medicine, the feelings and the thoughts that it's brought up for you. May it continue moving through you in your day. Tune into your center. Bring in that awareness into your center, into the way that you express, in the way that you use your words, in the ways that your mind is moving and drawing conclusions. I love you. Ciao.